Hello and welcome to Story Mode. It's very rare that we get to play a game that genuinely wants us to hate it. Like, this is a game designed from the ground up to piss you off. Or at least I personally, I think it is. Today we're talking about a game called Beckett. If you haven't seen the show before, welcome to Story Mode. This is the 28th episode. And for a monthly show, that's actually a lot of episodes. So every single episode, I'm amazed we've lasted this long. Real quick introductions. My name's Greg, and this isn't my Twitch channel for once. We're streaming on Lewis's channel because we thought we'd switch it up alongside of the fact that I'm trying to get Twitch partnerships, so it helps me keep my numbers up because this is a lower average show compared to some of the other stuff that we do. So as I said, real quick introductions. Lewis, who is hosting this show on his computer today, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. So yeah, I'm Lewis, also known as LRFLEW, as you could tell, because we're on my channel.
And Jacob, aka Thyeggman, how you doing today, man?
Doing pretty good. I was the one who subjected these guys to this game, but based on their reactions before the show, this is exactly why I wanted to play this game.
So at the end of every show, we sit down and we talk about what game we want to play next and why we want to play it. And we just kind of basically just dig through the gutters of Steam and try and find a game that literally nobody has played. This game has more forum posts by the developer than people who've actually played it, with a peak concurrent players today of 1. That would be me. So let's see if we can get it up to like 4, because that's the all-time peak. According to Steam Spy, before Steam Spy went down, this game had sold less than 150 copies. Steam Spy is no more, so we have no idea. It could have sold 1 million since then, but I see that as unlikely. Very low key game. So once again, it's called Beckett. This was developed by a group called the Secret Experiment, and it is a adventure game with a selection of found footage from the Internet Archive. And put simply, it's a surreal noir experience. I would describe it as horror or suspense even, but let's just roll over to Eggman, because Eggman played the game first, and he was the one who said we should play through this game. So what was it that caught you about this game that made you want to play it?
I guess before I even started playing it, I just looked at it, and there were a few reviews of it, and it looked like it fit our qualifications of not very many people have played it, and it just looked very different than anything else we had done yet, or in a while, I guess.
Or that ever existed ever.
That ever existed ever, and we'll get into that. But I was like, this is somewhat of a risky game, and I guinea pigged it about 3 weeks ago so we could have time to pick another one if it was not going to work. But after I played it, I was like, I don't know if this is a game that I like, but I definitely want to talk about it. And yeah. I think that that's a good qualification to be on this podcast.
100%. I should mention, by the way, for anybody who's new to this show, because I forgot to do this during the intro, this is a spoiler show. So everything we're going to be talking about in this show is spoilers. We're going to be talking about the game from end to end in detail, trying to pick it apart, figure out what we got out of it, whether it's right or wrong. That's just the way it goes. You can agree with us or disagree. If you are sensitive to spoilers, please, I do recommend that you go onto Steam and purchase Beckett. It's not super expensive. It's like 3 hours long playthrough. The archives will all be available on my YouTube channel and our SoundCloud. So I would recommend that you take a look at that. So Beckett, as I mentioned earlier, is an adventure game. It's a point and click, sort of. It's like a point and click. It's a linear point and click. So there's no real puzzles. There's some mini games, but in general, you play as a circle with a picture of your dude who's Beckett, and you are a private investigator who doesn't do domestic cases until he does. I don't do domestic.
Except the one that you do, which takes up the entire plot of the game.
Well, you only do it when the city basically comes to you and says, do this case.
Yeah, so
I'm still not sure why the city wanted to. Anyways, there's a whole subplot with the city and some gross shit.
Yeah, so let's give a quick rundown of what happens in this game. So basically, you start off in your apartment. You're this guy named Beckett. You get a phone call from a person named Daisy Starlight, and she's like, "Take my case," and he's like, "I don't do domestic cases," and he doesn't take the case. But then, throughout all this and through walking through his apartment, you can tell that this guy's pretty disturbed. He's an older guy, or maybe not so old. He's just like disheveled and
He's
doesn't
lived.
take. Yeah, he's seen some shit or something like
and
that.
Died and lived again.
And so basically, after that, you kind of wander around town. You end up running into some people. You end up taking the case and investigating it, and kind of reminiscing about your past along the way. And that's kind of the little nugget that kind of connects each of the different scenes. Basically, your lover, I don't know if they ever said that they were married. No, they must have. Well, I guess they don't necessarily have to be married, but they were living together. Basically, you were married to Amy at one point, and
you had a partner at one point.
Yeah, and she was very depressed, and she ended up killing herself. And so that's kind of where
there's a subplot where you find out what happened to Amy throughout the entire game, and it like cuts between flashbacks between Beckett and Amy talking about that.
Yeah. So the main mechanic, I mean, there's not really mechanics of the game. It's kind of a point and click adventure insofar that, like Blind said, you're just a circle, a little circle with a picture of Beckett on it. And yeah, you walk around and click on stuff that appears in the scene. The dialogue is all portrayed to you through text, and each of the dialogue lines is punctuated with a certain sound effect depending on who's talking, which is maybe one of the most disgusting parts of the game.
It's always disturbing. Whenever Beckett talks, it's a guttural, like just hacking like someone who's been chain smoking for the last 30 years of their life, just breathing. Yeah, and then there's people that are like a subtle scratching. Some of them are ASMR. Some of them are like weird kissy noises. It's okay. So I mentioned earlier on that this is a game that's designed for you to hate it. I think that this game was built from the ground up to call up deep emotions within you. And I'm making that sound way too serious. It's designed to gross you out. It's a surreal experience that tells a very disturbing story. I'm saying this because that's what it is, but that's also the Steam description. It's a selection of imagery that puts you into different situations. And in the developer's words, it makes you question what it is to exist and what reality is and whether or not we exist, and when we die, did we exist or did we just never exist? What is the meaning of life, and a lot of other super self
questions that could cause existential crises.
This is a game about existential crisis.
I mean, it kind of is. Yeah,
pretty much. I was just wondering if anyone else, because when I was playing the game, the thing that really got to me was the sound design. That the visuals were dark and bleak and whatever, but the sound design deeply disturbed me.
100% yes. I think that right when we were first playing through this, I remember I went on to because we have a private Discord chat, right? And I went in there and I said, I don't like this game. Like that's it. And then Eggman's just like, excellent. But no, I was just, this game is gross. I don't like this. There's nothing about this that I like. And I hold true to that. I don't like this game, but what I was trying to say in the intro is I think that's intentional.
I mean, yes, but just because something is intentionally bad doesn't mean it's not bad.
It's not bad.
It's worth saying
I don't like it. Something can be good, but I don't like it. Does that make sense?
I guess, but kind of my point was saying that just saying that it's disturbing, but it's intentional isn't so much an excuse as it is like a statement of how it's designed, if that makes sense.
Yeah, this is certainly a game that won't appeal to everybody, and even in the Steam descriptions, it says this is a game that is deeply disturbing, just so you know before you buy it and play it, because...
And then when you're playing it, every time you start up the game, there's an unskippable intro that basically says, "This is a work of fiction. If anything lines up with actual people, that is mere coincidence. None of this is real."
There's also a line that actually it's in the options menu. It says, "You don't need to play this. No one will judge you if you don't. People may judge you if you do." I thought that was kind of interesting, but
essentially, let's try and run through the chapters here.
Yeah.
I've just opened the game up and I'm looking at the main menu so I can see the chapter select. So that's going to help me. Initially in the beginning, you're in your apartment. And then it's just a little bit of walking around and you get some atmosphere. You get a phone call. A lady named Starlight phones you. What was her first name?
Daisy.
Daisy, yes. I wanted to say Margaret for some dumb reason. Anyways, Daisy Starlight calls you and doesn't introduce herself right away and basically says, "I need you to find my son. He's gone missing." And then my baby. And then Beckett's response is, "I don't do domestics. Nope, I don't do domestics." And she basically begs you and he says no. He hangs up, whatever. And then he's making his way out to the bar. You go get a drink. You get a little bit more atmosphere. Turns down a homeless person who's begging for money. And you get to the bar. And you go up to the bar and there's some people that you can sort of like not talk to, but eavesdrop on, I guess. And you can kind of like get an idea of the crowd that's in the bar. It's, pretty standard bar affair.
There's a prostitute there, I think. And then there's also...
There's a loving couple that then become a single man a moment later in the next scene, and a few other people.
Yeah, I didn't end up talking to all of them because I think the order that I chose them in, like some of them left before I talked to them, basically.
You can't talk to all of them. I played through that chapter twice.
It's worth addressing that other than you, who's represented by kind of a grainy image of a face, no one else is really represented by anything human. I think Daisy's represented later as a hat. The couple is represented by clams.
There's a midget in the game who's represented as like a piece of mold.
Yeah, something weird.
So basically everybody has a circular icon and the icon is just a thing. It could be a bug. It could be a maggot. It could be, I guess that's also a bug. It could be a piece of wood. It could be various different things, a sleeping bag, depending. And it kind of gives you an idea of what the character is without actually like showing an image of a person. Most of the imagery and graphics in this game is actually found footage taken from archive.org, which is quite interesting. And there is a lot of footage, including like graphic operation footage later in the game and like bugs and weird things in the background.
Let's like try to keep where we are in the story though. So yeah, we're in the bar.
So we're in the bar and then a shady figure calls you over and you have to go sit down with him. You talk with him and he's from the city and he character, male or female, I'm not sure, threatens you essentially, or what seems like basically saying you have to do this for whatever reason. We don't know why.
You have to take the case.
You have to take this case. Mrs. Starlight, who called you, you have to take that case. Doesn't matter. And then hands you a box and says, and you have to plant this in her bed. And it's got a grub in it, a parasite that will dig into your skin. So you have to put that in her bed as well as find her kid. And he says, and then you're done. Then you're out. So he was in, I guess Beckett's in some shit. He's probably had a shady career in the past doing some weird stuff for the city.
Yeah, we say he's a private investigator, and I don't think that's the whole story. And I don't think we really learn exactly what it is. And you didn't mention the shady guy. He's known to us only as the city representative, which I thought was interesting. Because is his private investigation firm then a federal operation?
Is he being blackmailed?
Is he being blackmailed? Is this like a heavily state-controlled society? Which I think that's actually one of my theories that it is. What was your guys' initial impression of the city representative?
Blackmail. I thought it was like this guy got him into some shit, so this guy from the city is using him as a contact to force him to do stuff.
When I played through it, at first I actually kind of didn't really get the threatening aspect of it. and it made it a little bit more confusing.
He was being super condescending in the writing. I can find the actual line if you would like.
It's fine, but I do understand. It was one of those things that when I looked back, I was like, oh, that does make sense.
Yeah, because you encounter the representative again later.
Mm-hmm.
So anyways, after Ninjiskis, or whatever the name of the bar is, that's the name of the chapter, we go to Starlight's house.
I want to mention something that ends up being very sad later, but what the prostitute that you meet in the bar, there's like a baby in the corner, and apparently it's her grandson. And it didn't, like, the lady wasn't described as particularly old, so like there you can see that there's like a very poor things are going on in her life, maybe. And she like asks you to look after the baby, and she tries to like get you to, you know, take her home or whatever, and you don't do it. And she leaves you a note that says dickhead, and the still in the corner there, and so she just leaves it. It's just like, what the heck is, what's going on? How is this allowed? Why?
Your note said dickhead?
Yeah, she said dickhead. I got that one too.
That's not what I got.
What'd you get?
So when you look in that area, so when you're being called over to the city rep, there's some things you can click on right there. And there's one thing you click on, which is the baby carriage, and you check on it, and the kid's sleeping or whatever. You go talk to the rep. That sequence plays out. You then go back, and she left a note that basically says, "Thank you for checking on my child."
Okay, can I say something about this game? This game's really bloody hard to play.
Yeah.
It is not clear at all a lot of the time what you can click on, what you can't, what you should click on, what you should be looking for to click on. The only way to actually get everything in this game is to play it like you're playing Carmen Sandiego, Where in the World, and literally just like start at the top, drag all the way to the left, move down a little bit, drag all the way to the right, move down a little bit, drag all the way to the left. That's what it feels like.
Yeah,
I didn't find it that hard, but
I did.
It's not. Sorry, it's not entirely obtuse because your cursor does change when you hover over anything. If you imagine a common point and click, they usually have common verbs, look, grab, talk to, whatever. They have icons that basically correlate to those common verbs, and when you hover over something you can interact with, it changes to one of those icons.
Yeah. All right, so then we go to...
Yeah, so we go to Daisy's next, but in between we see the first Amy scene, and these are scenes which intersperse each of like the different locations that you go to. In the first one, for example, we see Beckett and Amy at a zoo, and like some videos of primates, and then there's a love scene that describes them, and yeah, it's just kind of the beginning of a series of scenes like this.
They have a really sad relationship, especially later on.
And it says in that first one, or maybe this, I can't remember exactly, but I wrote this in my notes, is that Beckett is mistaking Amy's deep sorrow and depression for love. And so I don't know if that was something that was expressed explicitly in the scene, or if that's something that I just inferred.
I didn't catch
that. Okay. So I think that's something that I inferred, but I think it's also true after you see all of them.
Yeah.
He is doing things for her that he thinks she needs, but they're not helping.
Yeah. This game has a lot of different dark themes going on.
Yeah.
So then we go to Daisy's. Anybody else want to do that one? So I don't just sit here and talk the entire time.
And you go to her place.
Yeah, I can do that one. So I'm gonna need my notes though, and my cat likes to sit on my notes. So, anyways, so yeah, you go to Daisy's. Daisy is this like very large woman, and the noise that she makes when she talks is this smacking noise that you would expect a very rude person to make.
I thought it was like an insect noise.
Really?
Maybe it's an insect noise. There's a lot of insect imagery in this game, but she lives in this really tacky...
Don't play this game if you're scared of bugs.
I was going to say that the only sound effect in this game that I found more like repulsive to my core than Beckett's coughing was Daisy. And so this scene was painful to get through.
I didn't find Beckett's annoying. I found Daisy's really annoying. I was like, oh, come on, let's go.
See, Okay, so I mentioned before this game is trying to make you hate it. I think what it's trying to do, honestly, is give you a very vivid image of the character with as little imagery as possible. So we have, for Daisy, it's a very fancy hat. I think that's what that is. And then the weird insecty squeaky sounds. And then that combined with the writing is trying to give you a vivid image of the character without actually showing you a full model, which is actually part of the like minimalist design almost genius of this game, because it does actually give you a very vivid image and very real image of the character just from the sound that you get, which is very minimal, along with the image. And I think that that's actually really well done, even if it makes me absolutely squirm.
And that's, honestly, the squirming is probably the reaction that the developer was going for. So, and that's maybe not the reaction that we like to have, but I guess he succeeded if that's what his goal was.
I'd like to talk to the developer of this game.
That would be interesting.
Well, there's the forum where he's very active.
Yeah, he answers all the questions on there. Anyways, so you end up sitting down with her. She serves you tea, and this kind of stirs up some memories of your mom and dad. She ends up calling you Mr. Beckett, and he's like, no, please just call me Beckett. And presumably that's because his father is Mr. Beckett. But yeah. But he mentions that when he chooses tea over coffee, that it reminds him of his mother. So like you can see that he's had some problems with his parents as well. But then
really, she offered me gin.
Well, I got an option.
Is it gin? Sorry, yeah.
It's gin or tea, so you can go with tea.
Yeah, it is an option. That's right. Yeah, I forgot. I chose the tea.
I went with gin. He looked like he needed it.
I have no clue whether or not these choices do anything. I didn't go through a second time and choose different options, so I don't actually know if they do anything.
Well, I think that the only thing that it gives you is that little bit of context with his mother. Like, because I chose tea, he said, I chose tea like my mother would have done. But I assume that yours, if you remember, probably said something about your father.
If you choose gin, it says, I chose gin. My father also needed a wake-up call in the morning. And then she comments on it basically saying, oh, my husband used to always like to have the early morning jitters or something to that extent.
Yeah. And then she tells you the story of Peregrine, which is her son who's gone missing. Basically, Peregrine is this smart, aloof, bookworm, possibly autistic spectrum character.
He definitely seems autistic spectrum.
Yeah, that's the impression that I got.
Yeah,
he's for some reason bald, even though he's
balding.
Yep,
nothing too weird about that. It's just genetics.
And so he has this thing that we'll learn about a little bit more in a later scene called the soft paranoia, which means that he has visions of the world that are not correct.
I want to say it seems like a light schizophrenia.
It's a dissociativity disorder. I was talking to my dad, who's a neurologist, and he was talking about how he kind of gets upset when people misuse the term, and when I mentioned that, it's about kind of losing track of what's real, he was like, oh, so it's a dissociativity disorder.
Although I think we should talk about this when we get to the hospital scene, but I don't know if it's actually a real disease or just something that's made up. Made up for him so that he has to buy this medication, which you find downstairs in the apartment after she finishes the story. But yeah, that's basically the important parts of the story, and then you go search around her house and look in her room, look in Peregrine's room, and while you're in her room, you also plant the parasite. And you have some kind of existential crisis there too. You're like, oh, should I be doing this? I'm literally killing somebody right now. And
it was at that point that I posted in Discord, I don't like this game. Yeah. I don't like this game at all.
I'm not even sure whether or not that thing was intended to kill her, because there's a moment later where they kind of try to say what it's doing in really abstract terms, but the impression I got was that any death involved was accidental.
So skipping ahead, the parasite has a thing in it because that's very descriptive. Beckett looks inside of the box initially and says that, and right when you're placing it, he comments that the parasite's sac had been broken and it was oozing. Now, my theory is later in the game, it cuts to like, it's an unmarked van with weird dudes in it. And they're like, they're saying, okay, Daisy's lying down to go to sleep. And then suddenly they're tapping into her memories. My theory with that whole thing is that they've implanted a device in the parasite that's supposed to be seated in her brain to read her thoughts.
I thought it was just a microphone, but
Then how were they reading her dreams? Unless we were in her dreams instead of...
I thought it was just that we were in her dreams and not that.
Okay, well then, regardless, they planted something in the parasite to insert something into her, which is really weird.
I almost got the impression that the parasite was itself mechanical. He mentions when he takes it out of the box that he could see like wires and stuff, and I got the impression...
That's why I thought that they took an organic parasite and put a device in it, because he mentioned that the sac had been broken.
I thought that maybe it was the other way around, that it was a purely mechanical device that was made to look like an organic
Pardon me while I go vomit. Let's move on.
But yeah, let's... Either way.
Oh man, if this made you vomit, I'm sure that the hospital scene was great.
Hospital scene was fine.
What?
That's just my
was
job.
The worst.
That's my job.
Oh.
Everywhere.
I guess.
What, lobotomies are your job?
No.
Oh. Anyways, so you end up doing that, and then you kind of go say goodbye to Miss Starlight and leave. And as you walk out, this dwarf girl, who we'll later learn is named Candace, appears, and she said that she's Peregrine's friend,
and she's pregnant with his kid.
Yep. And your character literally, like, she says, "Oh, and also I'm pregnant," and he's like, walk away. He didn't respond at all.
He just walks away. You know, honestly, I kind of respect Beckett's like shittiness.
I completely understand. It's just like, this isn't my problem.
He is so done with everybody.
Yeah. So the clue that you end up was it? No, I don't remember. Oh yeah, the clues that you get downstairs when you're searching through the house. There's 2 bottles of medication, and one has Mrs. Starlight's name on it. And you ask her about it, and she says, "Oh, that one's it in case Peregrine runs out." Sure. And
she's on her son's meds.
And the other clue is that you see a ticket stub in Peregrine's waste bin that says Starlight ×2. But Miss Starlight was under the impression that he went to the theater alone the other day, and he was like he goes to the theater frequently.
He's a fan.
It's worth pointing out that Miss Starlight, when asked about it, she says that he wasn't even seeing anyone. That he didn't think his son...
that he's friends with everybody but doesn't have any romantic relationships.
Yeah.
He's not that kind of boy.
And that gets...
He's like double dating.
Yeah, and that gets immediately broken when you walk outside the apartment and, you know, it's like, oh yeah, by the way, I'm pregnant with his son.
She also points you in the general directions of some places he could be, mentions that their roommate, who you learn a little bit about, who's their uncle, I guess. They just describe him as uncle, who's living with them in a sleeping bag on the floor for screwing a coworker and like got shafted out of his job. Anyways, he's working on a construction site, and Peregrine was working with him on the construction site. So that's one of our, I think, our first leads.
No, the next one is we go to the hospital after we go through the market.
Yeah, that's one of the later leads, but we do go there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the market is interesting to me because you leave and you're on your way to the hospital, but you pass through this market, and I don't really know how that fits in with everything.
It's just kind of there. I breezed through that chapter really quickly, and it didn't really seem to have much consistency.
You can like click on all of the stalls, and they present little stories and stuff.
I think it was world building.
Yeah, this world in general seems very destitute and hopeless, I guess. You get the impression that talking to a lot of people that things aren't going well.
It feels like it's not quite modern day, but maybe an alternate history past a little bit. So like in a world where maybe Eastern states in like the 1980s, in like the 1980s ish, if technology just kind of stood still for a bit and shit went way downhill.
I mean, I'd kind of gotten the impression that it was maybe early 1900s, like maybe 1920 at the latest, but it was a society that was somehow obsessed with bugs.
Look at Beckett's glasses. That's not 1920s.
It's also like a really grainy black and white image. Like you're not, I don't know.
But the other thing is, like, at the very end, there's a cell phone, right?
I get like 80s, honestly, but like I think like alternate history 80s. But
yeah. So I don't think there's a lot to say about the market. There's like a stall that's owned by one of his friends who he doesn't even talk to. He just kind of like walks up and looks at the stall, which has a bunch of insects at it, and then leaves.
I mostly just kind of breezed through that chapter, like I barely remember it.
I don't know if you looked at that one, but there's a story that you can kind of click through, which talks about a person buying a necklace, and he pulls out the bug, and he like drowns, and he attaches it to the necklace, and then he's like, "Do you want it wings on or wings off?" And he's like, wings off, and just goes pluck, pluck. Here you go.
Okay.
Yeah. In between Miss Starlight's house and the market and the hospital, there's more Amy scenes. Amy was a composer. You see that in the very first scene. You pick up something that was written by her, and then in here you just learn a little bit more about Amy. She was like always the odd one out amongst her siblings, and the depression was always there. Oh, there's another thing that we haven't really talked about yet, but I say the depression was always there. Every once in a while, there'll be these words that just kind of flash on screen that are usually just kind of pithy sayings or just words that are evocative of what's going on in the scene at the time. So, yeah, they kind of allude to different things. Like, for example, when the city representative calls you over in the bar, there's the word fuck just like pops up on screen. You're like, oh no, this is bad for me. Yeah. But yeah, Lewis, do you care to go through the hospital then, or?
I don't know exactly what I could say about the hospital. I didn't take any notes on this, so I don't have a lot of it, but I think that was the only scene I'd kind of went through twice. And it's really bizarre. You end up kind of waiting in the waiting room for a little bit. There's a little thing that basically says that they're backlogged, and the hospital apologizes for the wait. You get a fade out and you fade back in, and you end up getting called back, and you go through this really labyrinthy hospital setup. And you can look into rooms, and each one of those has a little video. There's one I remember very early on where you can see a bunch of mice. There's a lot of really weird stuff, like depictions of surgeries, and one that I'm pretty sure is a lobotomy.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of bizarre stuff. It's what's weird about the kind of labyrinthian system is that there's a lot of hallways that might have like up to 3 exits you can choose to go through. But if you actually go back and try to replay it, each exit takes you to the same spot. So it's just meant to invoke the feeling of being lost, I think.
Oh, really?
Yeah. This is the scene that I found the most disturbing because I am very uncomfortable with blood and bodily, like, guts and...
See, I think this is where you and me are completely different. I will watch surgeries on YouTube. That stuff's fascinating to me. So to me, like, none of that was really a problem.
I feel like I'm
bugs
probably,
though.
I'm
Put
probably,
a bug on screen and I'm out. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm probably in between you two and some of that. I was definitely a lot worse off when I was younger, but I've gotten a lot better about that sort of thing. But there was one scene that I literally had to put my hand over my face and click out of as quickly as I could, because there was something about a needle in an eyeball, and I was just like, nope, I'm out. I am done. Nope.
I clicked off that one real quick too.
Yeah.
Like even you describing it, I'm just like, oh, that sounds no. Oh,
I think
no.
I watched that entire thing. I was just sitting there staring at it going, oh wait, I can skip this.
See, the thing is,
I was waiting for it to end and then it looped.
I find it kind of interesting because Blind described this as a horror game, and I don't disagree with that. And
it's psychological horror.
And yet you didn't think that Aporia was a horror game.
You see, I'm used to that kind of stuff. It's okay. It's a different kind of horror. How's this? So we played through Aporia Beyond the Valley. You should go listen to that episode. Fantastic episode. I very much recommend it. It was a good one. I enjoyed that game. It had some jump scares in it, but that's just like a whoa. Okay, yeah. I'm never gonna think about that moment in that game ever again. It doesn't stick with me. It's not scary. Something like Beckett, I'm still thinking about Beckett, and will still be thinking about Beckett next week because of some of the things that this game brings up, combined with the imagery, combined with the attitude, combined with the atmosphere, combined with the storytelling, the writing, the existential dread, what it talks about, the meaning of existence. That shit sticks with you. That's good horror. That is good suspense. That's good surreal noir. That is something that is designed for you to hate it, but it will stick with you, and it's well done. That's what
I'm glad that I thought of that comparison, because like that explains to me a lot better what the like central disagreement that we were having over Aporia was, that you thought that this is your version of horror.
Yeah.
Lewis and I are more on the train of like Aporia is a genuine horror experience, which actually I enjoyed quite a bit. But I wasn't expecting it, which is why it caught me off guard.
Neither was I, to be honest. Just kind of happens halfway through the game and then goes away again.
Yeah.
That was a weird game. I mean,
my issue with Aporia was that the horror worked against a lot of its core mechanics. Like, it's a puzzle game. You should make me curious and want to look at everything in the game. Horror is the exact opposite.
Anyway, this is a game that you have to look at everything, and it's right in front of you, and it's staring you in the face, and there's giant bold text saying you're gonna fucking die.
Yeah.
Yeah. So eventually you wander through the hospital and you make it to the desk of the reality principal, which...
That sounds like a band name. Like Stephen Hawking and the reality principal.
I feel like it would be the other way around. It would be Principal Reality.
Principal Reality?
To me, it sounds like they have, despite the fact that they're probably just like the director of the hospital as we would know it, it sounds like they have a more important position in society than we probably realize just from the context of this game, because I thought of two things actually in literature that this reminded me of. One was Brave New World, in which it's a state society where everybody is drugged on this drug called Soma, which basically induces hallucinations and makes everybody happy and makes them not realize that everything is completely wrong. Although in this world, people seem to realize that things are wrong, so not quite there.
Yeah, they're not good enough yet. They're getting there.
Yeah. And the other one was a short story by, I believe, Kurt Vonnegut, and it's called Harrison Bergeron. And it's about the far future in America, where instead of a president, we now have a handicap general, and everybody is assigned handicaps to bring them all down to the same level so that everybody's equal. Except for Harrison Bergeron, they can't find handicaps that are strong enough for him, and he's just like an athlete and a star and a genius, and they're like, we have to capture this guy. And like the handicap general like bursts into this newscast that he's like taken over and just like shoots him. It's ridiculous. But I don't know, like the drugs that he was prescribing to Peregrine sounded a lot like that, in my opinion. These drugs that were meant to like cure the soft paranoia or mitigate it or whatever.
I'm not sure I got quite that impression that it was some sort of cover up in a sense. But there is an important thing to go over. So you go to the reality principle because you want to ask them about Peregrine. Is that how you pronounce this? I don't know.
Yeah.
You go to ask him about it, and he basically starts testing you. There's a little mini game you have to do where he's like asking you questions, and you have to avoid the negative thoughts.
Okay, it's Missile Command with a brain. OG video game people know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
Moving on.
and they come in way too fast, so you can't avoid all of them.
You can't hit all of them, but like, it's fine. You don't need to hit
and your
all
paddle gets bigger the more you block because
it's a silly little mini game.
It's a dumb mini game. Move on.
Yeah, it's a really dumb mini game. But then afterwards, he ends up handing you the pamphlet on that soft paranoia. And I feel like that kind of is a hint at something that maybe you're looking at an unreliable narrator. That what you're seeing isn't necessarily what it is. So a lot of the stuff that we're seeing that feels off or wrong, things like the bugs or whatever, is more a product of Beckett than the world.
You know, that's a good point, because one of the things that the pamphlet that you get about soft paranoia says is that it's a medication to help you try to stop trying to interpret the world. And I think that's very like authoritarian and controlling. Like that's a ridiculous thing to want to do to a person, right?
Well, the developer of this game has talked pretty openly about how this game is supposed to make you question what it is to exist and question what our reality is. So throwing in we have, okay, so it right now we have two characters, right? We have Beckett, who's supposed to be somewhat grounded, and then we have Peregrine, who is off in La La Land. And then it's comparing and contrasting their two realities and the way they both see the world and how they see the world extremely differently.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that whole hospital sequence is kind of didn't mess me up, but just confused me. I just kind of came out of it with nothing. It's like, I don't know what this is.
Yeah, I got the impression that it was like the crux of the entire story, that everything after that hinges on that one scene. But at the same time, I wasn't like, oh, I understand the scene.
Yeah, for me, it's like, oh, what? Like, I don't know.
Okay, so you get through the hospital enlightened but still confused somehow,
yes,
which I think we all shared. And you go to the construction site where Peregrine's supposed to be working. And there you meet Arnold, and he's basically an abrasive, I don't know, asshole. Yeah.
Basically, so you go in and then you see a bunch of people working there, and you ask about Peregrine, and they all go, "Oh, that kid!" Basically, like make fun of him, and then say, "Oh, Arnold will know where he is." And then you go into the supervisor's office, and you meet a large man, or described as a large man, who's always drinking tea. And then he gets mad at you for standing and staring at him and says that he wants you to sit down. So you sit down, and he gives you tea. You drink tea, and he comments that it's really hot. And how are you drinking that, you crazy person? And then they talk for a little bit about Peregrine. Apparently, Peregrine is very spaced out, not a very good worker. He has a hard time getting along with the guys. Who earlier, Daisy basically said that he always friends with everybody. So serious, it's more and more obvious now that Daisy has absolutely no hold on who her son is.
I'm sure that you guys have met people like this, but the way that it was described remind me of like that guy in high school that you probably knew, who's like, he thinks that he's friends with everybody, but everybody kind of like makes fun of him behind his back about not really being his friend, but they like kind of pretend to be his friend.
As the person who doesn't really remember anyone like that from high school, I'm starting to feel like maybe I was that person, but
I mean, I know for a fact, at least in Scouts, I was that person.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I was ever that person, but I knew that there were definitely people in my class who were that person. I might have been another one.
I empathize with that person. I'll say that.
I think maybe what that was is everybody was that person to an extent, so it's really easy to identify with that person. But I think what this character is it's literally everybody, because in high school you have your crew of people that you hang out with, and then that crew of people that you kind of hung out with that all talk shit about you when they weren't hanging out with you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think it's pretty easy to identify with a character like that, even if like looking at it from a distance, like in hindsight saying, yeah, maybe I was that person, but in reality, like you weren't that person specifically, you were just adjacent. And
yeah,
that's just clique nature. That's how kids are. But yeah, I think we described the stereotype pretty good.
Man, the high school talk is more depressing than Beckett.
I wasn't even in high school.
Well, yeah, because you were homeschooled, right?
So all I have for reference is like Scouts and sports and other extracurricular activities, and that was bad enough.
I mean, I had a really small high school. My graduating class was like 25. So
I don't think I knew 25 people in the first 10 years of my life.
205.
I think my sister's was like 600.
As a homeschooled kid, that blows my mind because I was raised in the country. I genuinely don't think I knew 25 people my age for the first 10, 12 years of my life.
So then I guess my sister's 600 graduating class is probably a little mind-blowing.
Well, not mind-blowing, but it's just like, a
lot. And so, yeah, you investigate the construction site a little bit, and you eventually get out of the workers that he went off after this woman named Joan, and they kind of snicker about it, and you're like, okay, whatever, I'm just going to leave now.
And there's like a sinkhole behind them.
Yeah, you kind of walk up to it and look around for a little bit and have some thoughts of suicide, but...
Oh, is that what that was? I thought there was a body at the bottom. I wasn't sure if you were thinking about jumping to the bottom or was there actually a body at the bottom.
I am so confused because I seem to remember something about like a buried city, which reminded me of Futurama and Old New York.
I think that's Old New York, actually.
Old New York was once New Amsterdam.
See, like when you walk, because you walk up to the hole, you look down the hole, and then Beckett thinks about how there was, like you can see the signs of the old roads and the old stuff that we've built over years ago. So it does sound like a Old New York adjacent. And then if you click on the pit enough, it lights up and there's a body at the bottom. And I thought it was a cover-up. I thought somebody died down there. Initially, I thought it was Peregrine who died down there. I was like, oh, well, there he is.
I thought it was a statue.
I thought that was a body. And then later, you wake up with that girl after the bar scene. It was a very similar, like, lying position to the person in the bed. I don't know, but I thought there was a body.
I thought it was a statue.
I thought it was a body. Okay, but it's the surreal art of this game. It's kind of hard to tell, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then you end up going to the on your way to the way to find Joan. You don't know where to find Joan, but you end up going to this park. And in the park, this is some of the more interesting imagery in the game, in my opinion. But basically, you go through and there's these monuments that have these, you have to rotate them, and as you rotate them, there are notes that are revealed.
Mm-hmm.
And they basically are some more world building. They tell you about your father and how he played a role in like the building of the borough, which is the city or place that you're in. And they give you more background on the borough. And then you meet Jimmy, the park's keeper, who is a childhood friend. He is just hanging out. You don't really...
You acknowledge his existence, then move past him.
Basically. Then you run into some ranters, one that's ranting about God and one that's ranting about the devil. And then you run into
protesters.
And along the way, there's these benches that you can sit down on, and they have pamphlets on them about this. It's a beach or something. I can't remember what exactly it says.
It says the shore, I seem to remember. And then it has like little snippets about something. It's like, I think one of them said Beckett on it.
Yeah. And then that's where you end up finding Joan. But you also run into this gangrenous, cancerous old woman who's also blind and deaf. Who's called the Oracle for some reason. And she just sits on a bench and holds a pot, and money goes into it. And hopefully people put money into it. Jimmy collects the money because she can't hear it or see it. And then gives her bread, which she somehow eats. Yeah, it was very strange. I don't
even think I encountered that.
Yeah, you have to like go click on the bench to do that.
Do you have to? Okay, I might have just walked right past that. I don't.
It's possible to do that. So yeah. One of the things that you learned is that your mother died of cancer, and so that's kind of reminds you of that.
Yeah, I think I missed that completely.
There's a lot of strange world building. I think it's in this chapter that they start talking about like a previous war. There's one point that's actually really creepy where they talk about like, I think it's in the hospital. They talk about brainwashing people to forget about the war or something.
There's a lot of weird.
That's what that was about.
There's a lot of weird political intrigue in those two chapters.
So in the hospital, there's a line. I don't know if it's in the waiting room or where, but there's a line that says, everybody remembers the shooting. Nobody remembers the brainwashing.
I saw that line, but I didn't know what that was about.
Yeah. And then as you're walking through the park, there are some kids playing pretend war, but there's real gunshots over it. And I thought like there was an actual battle going on because it would fit in this world fairly well.
Yeah. Is that okay? So it was kids playing pretend war.
Yes.
All right.
It did put me on edge, though.
Then there's fully 3D statues, which is weird because it's like, wait, there's 3D objects in this game?
Yeah, that was strange.
Yeah, it's like this game's done
all over the place. Like it's everything from like as I mentioned, the found footage, and then like almost collage like maps, and then just like also now the entire screen is just a text. It's just text with like overlaid like kind of transparent video in the background of maggots falling. Like it's
and
interesting, man.
And then right after this we go into the club scene, which is like vomiting pink and yellow and green and blue and
seizure warning,
colorful.
Yeah, I'll say that scene, the one in
the monitor was dying.
The theater is next and the club is after that.
Yeah. Okay. Then let's go to the theater and talk about the club. After that.
Yeah.
Insect Bowl.
The Insect Bowl Theater. What a lovely name for a theater. Do you want to go visit the Insect Bowl and see the new play called Morgellon and Ekbom Live Here? Which was the name.
No. No, I don't.
The play was bizarre.
And the guy at the entrance, the guy taking your ticket, his image is literally like a happy face, sad face mask, smoking a cigarette.
We have to talk about, though, the gossip ladies, though. The two pregnant, drinking, smoking gossip ladies. And then the subsequent conversation between their fetuses in utero, which was one of the trippiest things in the game.
When they're talking about how, oh yeah, no, you look so lovely. Like we should get this champagne. The baby will love it. I hear that they hear and taste everything. Okay. Have fun with fetal alcohol syndrome, honey.
I think I missed some of that. Or I just wasn't paying attention because the they taste everything sounds familiar, but nothing else does.
Oh God. It's just like, I can't believe that people like this exist in this world, but I guess they
exist in our world, dude.
Up. I mean, I guess, but like the things that hurt children in this game, namely in the bar at the beginning in Nijinsky's, where the lady just leaves the baby behind, and then now when there's two pregnant women, obviously with no care for the lives of their children, that's the stuff that really gets me. It's just like, oh God.
Oh God is a really good way to describe this game, actually. That might be my Steam review. Positive. Oh God.
Yeah. So yeah. And so you go into the theater and two people that you know are there, namely Dwarf Girl, aka Candace, and a city representative.
Also, I'm glad I didn't stream this game because there is like several shots of just tits.
Right after this, yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so you watch the play Morgellon and Ekbom live here, which is nonsense. The
play itself is bizarrely constructed. So the narrative is a guy tries to turn on a light and then he loses his arm, and then the other guy turns into a bug and stands on a chair or something. Like that's what visually happens.
The guy who's trying to turn on the light is like bleeding insects.
Yeah, and there's a whole story, a narration over it, and then like the only
narration's really good.
Yeah, and there's like sound effect buttons and light effect buttons you can click on. Yeah, you can basically just mess up the whole thing, and then you control the lights and the curtain. Like you have to open and close it, and I'm not gonna pretend I get it. Not at all. It's just bizarre.
I think that's the point. I don't think it's supposed to say anything, and if it is, it's too obtuse for me.
I wonder if it is more meant to play to Peregrine, because we mentioned before that he's possibly autistic spectrum, and maybe this is a theater that does like locally written community, like Nobody's. It's a very like small theater, and it's just
that would make sense because the ticket guy at the entrance says, "Thank you very much for supporting the local arts." So that makes sense.
They mentioned that it's Peregrine's favorite play, I believe.
Yeah, and they said repeatedly that he is actually he goes there frequently, and so I found that's just interesting. Yeah. So, what did you end up saying to Dwarf Girl and the city representative? City representative is basically just checking up on you. The Dwarf Girl, I don't know, she just tells you her name. I don't think there's anything that is super important.
I didn't talk to her, so I don't know.
Oh, she asks you to tell Peregrine that she loves him, I think.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
But you don't. You don't pass the message on.
Nope. And that's right after that is when we get the dialogue with the insect and the people in the unmarked van on the outside, and where Miss Starlight presumably dies. We don't actually see her die, but
which we talked about earlier.
I think they say she dies though, so that's
yeah.
A lot of this game is text anyway, so if the text says she dies, I can presume that's the case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So now we go to the shore, which is basically a party beach. You get a very different atmosphere here. It's like low pumping music that you would like see in a club, for example, but it's apparently a just crowded beach full of people with a DJ. You order some drinks. So things are, it seems like for Beckett, at least, that things are turning into just another day for him, because I can imagine that he is a pretty heavy drinker just based on what else we've seen in this game.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is where he doesn't find Joan. Joan finds him, and Joan is the person that Peregrine actually attended the theater with instead of Candace. And Joan apparently did it just to like humor him, but when they went into the theater, she started snickering because she thought it was also ridiculous, and Peregrine like glared at her. And then Peregrine afterwards asks her out at the end of the play, and she turns him down. And apparently the guy at the front of the theater said that he just like stood there for, I don't remember who it was that said he just stood there forever, but like he stood there forever and then disappeared.
Didn't Jones say that basically he had asked her, he had walked her to her house?
Yeah. So go on.
He had walked Joan to her house, asked her out, she'd rejected him, and then she said that 20 minutes later he checked outside and he was still just standing there essentially on the front porch in the rain.
Just staring blankly.
Yeah, staring blankly, and before she could call the police, he just disappeared. That was the last he was seen.
Yeah. Yeah, so earlier we had a little story of Peregrine, and that was like it was a very different aesthetic. It was more of a storybook aesthetic, and we get another one of those with the story of Perry and Joan that describes all this. What do you guys think of that? I thought that was actually a pretty good touch. It didn't really fit with the rest of the game necessarily, but it kind of helped temper the just kind of like depression and horror, psychological horror aspect of the rest of the game, I guess.
I guess, but I will say that that whole thing with the shore, which as I understand is some sort of club, like somewhere between a dance club and a strip club.
It's a nightclub.
Yeah, some sort of nightclub, and that had the best sound design, I think, of anything else in the game. So much else was like intentionally disturbing to the point where it like made it painful to play through the game. But that was one of the few times where I felt like the sound design worked.
Mm-hmm. I think the sound design in the club is really good.
Yep.
Actually, I think the sound design in this game is really good in general. It's just really good in a bad way.
So, Blind, I think that this may have been before we started the show, but you said you had to mute it. Did you get... You said you thought the sound design there was good. Did you just mute it for the parts that...
There was portions of the game where I would mute it, yes.
Okay.
If I got too annoyed by certain sounds, I would just mute it. Like in Starlights, I muted it. In the hospital, I muted it as well. But there were places where I'd unmute and mute. I was periodically muting the game throughout the entire thing, or like varying the volume up and down a lot, depending on what the voices were. I do think this game is really well made for what it is, and I do think it's really good for what it is. I just don't like it. That's like the weirdest opinion I've ever had about a video game.
Yeah, so we're almost to the end now, and it gets kind of, well, actually more confusing and a little bit trippy now. Because
it wasn't before, just to be clear.
I guess not. But basically, so he has this conversation with Joan, and a little bit more happens. But we get another Amy scene, and this is the one like in the previous Amy scene. We haven't been talking about all of them. We learned that she killed herself, and this one is more metaphorical in that he's on an infinite escalator and he's trying to reach her, and he's been mentioning outside of these scenes that he's struggling to remember her, and he doesn't want to forget her, and so it's kind of a metaphor for that internal struggle
after the shore. He wakes up, but like after the nightclub scene, he wakes up in bed with a girl, because you just go drink at the end of that scene. So he wakes up in bed with somebody in somebody else's house, and he just kind of gets up and leaves. And while he's leaving, he gets mugged.
Mm-hmm.
And he wakes up, and his wallet is missing, and he's lost the photo of Amy. And that's what triggers the Amy scene.
Oh, okay, right.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember the exact order of all that.
Now you get beaten up by a bunch of guys.
Yeah, so, and as you're on, like, you get beaten up, and then they take your stuff. And this is another one of those really sad moments in the game for me, is that on your way back to the apartment, you hear the baby that was in the bar crying outside the bar, nobody looking after it, and you just walk by.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's very dark, and you go back to the apartment and you find that it's been ransacked, basically.
Yeah, kind of looted or ransacked.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and during all this, you get the text, "You don't exist." Like the words that you see on the screen.
Yeah.
And
This is where things kind of turn it up to 11 with the whole existential crisis thing.
Yep. He goes to a beach, or not really a beach. It's more like a sewage area where like crap drains into the ocean, or I pictured it as an ocean, I guess.
Yeah, well, I mean, oceans generally have beaches, so I'd gotten that it was some sort of beach.
Yeah, and then you're just kind of meandering around, and we kind of lose track of Beckett. We don't really know what happens, but we shift perspective and we find Peregrine. And Peregrine is just on the beach collecting stones.
And throwing stones into the water.
Yep. And that's the end of the game.
Okay.
Not quite.
We need to address this because
yes,
this game has multiple endings.
Okay, so the one that I described, I got ending, or I got reality B is what they call in the achievements. And I know you guys both got A.
Yeah.
Okay, so you describe what you did then.
Because, I mean, at least the ending I got starts the same way. You find Peregrine throwing rocks into the water, and in ending A, you start trying to talk to him, and he basically starts saying, like, essentially you don't exist, that, you know, only thing that exists is what's in my mind. And then you end up in this bizarre cutscene where you're talking to, I'm presuming, that person from the city who is like, you have done everything you need to do. And then it's like implied that you went into the ocean and drowned yourself or something. It was bizarre.
It sounds no more or less conclusive than my ending was, I suppose. Although,
was it that you drowned yourself? I don't think you drowned your. Okay, so here's the way I interpreted ending A, reality A, which is you're talking to Peregrine, and then Peregrine essentially turns around and he says, "No, I'm not going home. She's dead," which is true. His mother is dead. And then he says, it doesn't matter where I end up. It doesn't matter if I end up in the insane asylum. It doesn't matter if I end up in the hospital under the needle. It doesn't matter if I take these pills and sink back into your reality. Because in fact, I'm not in your reality. You're all living in mine. And it's like literally a voice screaming, you're living in mine. And then Beckett basically just turns around and walks away. And while he's walking away, he finds a cell phone. Cell phone rings and says, you're free, you can go do what you want. And then just words appear on the screen that says Beckett no longer exists, whatever that means.
Well, there was also like some wording, something about him seeing Amy off in the ocean or something.
Yeah, he saw a poltergeist of, I think it said he saw a poltergeist of Amy, or like a apparition of Amy. And then it just says Beckett no longer exists. I interpreted that as he just had a heart attack, just keeled over and died. Done.
I don't know. It's bizarre. The short version is it's bizarre.
Yeah, I also, in my ending, I also had the Beckett is no more. I didn't have the cutscene with the city representative. And one of the things that Peregrine says, which you guys may not have gotten in your ending, is that Peregrine thinks that he doesn't feel like he sees the world incorrectly. And that's what the medication is supposed to help with.
Maybe that's what he was trying to say with the I'm not living in your reality, you're all living in mine.
And maybe he said it in a different way in my ending. And so I guess that at least the way that he said it in ending B was that, or that's what made me think that like this is in some respects, a drug-controlled society that has this important person called the reality principal who's like assigning these drugs to people so that they interpret the world in a certain way, or stop trying to interpret the world and stop trying to fix the problems or lack thereof, or, you know, something like that. So, yeah.
And there is, I believe, one more ending. So in the achievements, there's reality A, reality B, and one that just says life. Life has a 1.3% achievement rating. So only 1.3% of the people who've played this game have gotten this achievement, and based on what I've read, I think it's a third ending. Yeah. I'm not sure. I don't know anything about the ending. None of us got
like it. The one issue with playing games that nobody's played is I can't go like watch a guide. because there is none.
Yep.
Yeah, I'd be curious as to see how you get life, because there was some discussion in the little bit of discussion that's on the Steam forums. Somebody's like, "Oh, I'm going to write a guide," and they didn't end up writing a guide. But
yeah,
the developer was like, "Let me know if you need any help," to the person. He's like, "No, I got it." I apparently the person went and got the achievements, so good for that.
Yeah.
Now, as Fox Text mentioned in the chat just now, Samuel Beckett was a very dismal writer. This game is loosely based on the work of Samuel Beckett, and I have his Wikipedia page open here. He passed away in 1989. He was an Irish writer who spent a lot of his life in Paris and wrote both in English and French. And he wrote a collection of minimalistic tragedy novels alongside of a bunch of plays. He won a Nobel Prize in Literature in 1969. I am not familiar with any of his work. I will drop it in the Twitch, the Wikipedia page I'm looking at in the Twitch chat. After looking at some reviews for this game on Steam, the few that there are, a lot of people refer to this game as being based on Beckett himself, if Beckett was a private investigator instead of a writer. So that makes this game kind of strange from that point of view. If nothing else, it's inspired by his work. So being unfamiliar with his work and kind of not really knowing who he was until after doing a little bit of research on this game, now I want to look into it.
I'd be interested. We didn't do this, but seeing as the developer, it's a small developer, apparently works by himself or with very few other people.
A handful of help.
Yeah. It would be interesting to tweet at him about this podcast and see if he comes back and says anything.
I think I might do that.
But
I already added him, so
yeah. So I don't know if this is or Twitter is a platform that he'll engage on, or if it's going to be. I don't know, but I think that he had some very specific ideas of what he wanted this game to be, and I don't think that they came across crystal clear. But I also think that it's a better game for them not being crystal clear, I guess.
Here, I'm gonna go to the games. I'm gonna go to the games forums real quick and just read what he wrote, because he had some very specific wording about the game, and that's
what made me think that he had very specific ideas of the things that he wanted to portray in the game.
So the developer's name is Simon Meek, and this was posted on March 28th. The game was released in February. And it just says, "The words in your head. Beckett questions what it is to exist. It is a dark exploration of the space in our heads. It is an unsettling journey through the unknown in search of meaning. Beckett is an inquiry and a conversation, so let's start one." And then there's no responses.
We win. We did the most conversation.
Yeah.
Hour and a half of it.
The biggest tragedy about this game is that literally nobody's played it. It has 7 qualified user reviews, 11 in total. Some of them were given the game for free.
I think that, and this is kind of we're getting to our this is my kind of final conclusion. And you already typed one in chat, and I agree with yours too. But I don't know that I would recommend this game to everybody, to anybody, but
I wouldn't.
It's a very tough game, and I don't think that I would recommend spending your Saturday, if you're going to play a story game, playing this game, because it's not.
Play through What Remains of Edith Finch.
It's not a game that's going to make you happy. And maybe if you want your own existential crisis, I don't know, maybe pick it up. But I won't say that I regret having played it or bought it, because I don't think that's true. So
I'm kind of. Are you finished?
Yeah.
I'm kind of with you. I'm happy that I got the opportunity to play this game. I'm happy that I looked at it. I think that if you love surreal horror, this is a thing for you. This is a game that will stick with me for a long time. I think that was the intention of the creator, is to create a thing that will stick in your memory and that you will continue to pull apart in your brain for a while. I might even play through it again at some point. Do I like it? No. I fucking hate this game. But it's extremely good at what it does. And it's, for what it is, very well made and achieves its goal flawlessly. But it's this, I think, is it possible to recommend a game and then say don't play it?
You know, people often do this with like really bad games. People will say don't buy this game, it's really bad, and people will be like, oh my god, I have to buy this game to see how bad it is.
It's not bad though. Like, it's really good.
Yeah, it's like maybe that's the best,
but you'll hate it.
Maybe that's the best like affirmation that we can give this game, is that like maybe don't buy it. I don't know. It's a very hard game to.
I mean, if you've watched this show, you're already spoiled, so it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
I feel like this is not a thing you can spoil. It's something you have to experience.
Yeah, it's a very experiential thing.
I mean, my thoughts, I will say this. If you know me, and if you know how I do this podcast, you will know that I try to play every single game we do on the show at a minimum twice. This is usually to check to see if there's alternate endings, get a better depth of the story, check to make sure there's not things I'm missing, see if, on retrospect, some things start to make more sense, so on and so forth. And I played this game on Friday. I sat through the entire thing in a couple of sittings, and I kind of came away from it saying, this game really disturbed me. I didn't enjoy the experience with it. And so the next day I was like, okay, I should probably play this again. And I kind of sat there at my computer trying to work up the nerve to do it for about an hour when I finally said, no, I'm not going to play this a second time. And it's the only game I really haven't. This game was so fundamentally upsetting.
Is this the Schindler's List of video games?
Maybe. But it's something where I can't say it's so much bad. Like, there's an interesting story in there. And we were able to discuss this for almost an hour and a half now, but...
This has been a pretty long episode.
Yeah, but it really... It was painful to sit through. If we weren't doing this for the podcast, I probably would have quit after an hour.
I wouldn't have made it through, like, the third scene when you go over to Daisy's house. I wouldn't have made it through that.
Yeah.
I would have gotten to the scene when you get into the bedrooms, and after going through the bedrooms, I would have been like, no.
It's an interesting game. It fascinates me. I just can't recommend it because it's too difficult to get through.
I also need to make this clear. I don't think there's anything else in existence like this game. This game blends mediums. It's a collage, it's a point-and-click adventure, and it's a collection of short films. Almost. Like... It feels like an art piece more than a video game. Like when this pops up often in games media and stuff. Oh, video games is art. Video games is art. Yes, they're definitely art. This video game could be an art gallery unto itself. It's a very curated selection of imagery that gives you a very specific feeling. So
I think this was a good episode, despite our mixed.
We don't need to like the game for it to be a good episode of Story Mode.
I think some of our best episodes were for games that were fundamentally flawed.
Or games that we didn't like.
Yeah, ones that we had Virginia, where we were split 50-50 on whether or not we liked the game.
That episode came to blows, dude.
Yeah. And we had episodes like, Empathy Path of Whispers, which was a game that we all ended up not liking, but...
That was not a game.
But it brought up some of the more interesting discussions, which is why when Eggman was like, oh, we should do this game, despite the fact that I looked at the trailer, I looked at the description, and I said, I won't like this game, I was like, sure. They'll make a good episode.
Cool stuff. Maybe you can pick the next one because
The the best part about this show is the fact that it forces us to play through games that we wouldn't normally play through.
I would get through very few games if it weren't for this show, and I am very glad to have both an excuse and a directive, basically, to play through these games.
Well, 28 games later, and I'm still going. So
Yeah.
I guess we're all done here.
I think
Okay,
so, yeah.
so for everybody who's watching live, we peaked at 17 viewers. So that is 10 more than Lewis was guessing at. So this is our first episode not on my Twitch channel. This was on Lewis's channel. So thank you very much for hosting us. I think we'll maybe alternate back and forth. We'll see.
We'll figure out something.
Yeah, this has been good, I think. But if you're watching this live, I think we're gonna do a short after hours question mark. We didn't talk about this in advance.
I'm
You
free.
probably can.
Yeah, I can hang out for 10 minutes or maybe a bit longer than that. If you are watching the recorded version and you would like to see more episodes, you can find us on SoundCloud, which is just Storymode podcast, and you can find us on Steam. We have a Steam curator. We also have Twitter, which is @RealStoryMode, where you can find all the links. So follow us in all those places. My name is Greg. I post the show. You can find me at twitch.tv/BlindIRL or stupidskull.com. And let's just go to Lewis. Is there anything you would like to shout out?
I'll shout out my Twitch channel, which if you're watching this live, you're on it, twitch.tv/LRFLEW. I'm thinking maybe later today I'll actually do a speedrun of Empathy Path of Whispers. You'll get to see just how broken that game really is.
You know what we should do? We should do you should speedrun Empathy Path of Whispers with us in the background talking. That's what you should do.
You should just do it in after hours. It'll take like 30 minutes.
Anyway,
I could do that, but I'll probably need to restart the stream anyways because I have a different layout set up for that, and it will just be...
We'll figure it out if we want to do
it'll
it.
be fine. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thyeggman.
Yeah, so I haven't been doing a ton on Twitch lately. Actually, I've been doing a little bit more. I've been streaming some of my work on OpenRCT2. I've been more active in the OpenRCT2 Discord. I've been participating in some of the challenges there, but I don't really have. I'm not very active. But if you want to see programming, which is maybe one of the most dry things possible on Twitch,
Only if Stout's streaming it. Actually, we should make Stout play this game.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, go on.
So yeah, if that even remotely interests you, give me a follow, and I probably won't stream more than about once a week, so I won't be clogging up your following feed or anything like that.
So with that, I would like to say seriously, thank you very much for watching this episode of Story Mode, and we'll be back in a couple minutes with After Hours, and you know what? Yeah, we'll figure that out in a second, and you guys are all absolutely fantastic, and you want to take us out, Lewis? Just hit the button.
Yeah, okay. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. I don't have control, so you know.